Well, actually, my first experience of health was waiting for my mum in a skins ward for children. And I used to have to wait there regularly. And I think that probably opened up seeing beyond some of the things, the skin conditions that the children had to the person behind that. But it was actually particularly when I went to live in a large community for people with intellectual disabilities, where I lived alongside people, that I started to change in my thinking. I'd been trained as a nurse, both in learning disability and in general nursing, having worked in acute care. But it was that time that really started to form a different perspective. I then went on to work with a woman with dementia, where, this being nearly a quarter of a century ago, all I saw was her problems. All I saw was the things that we needed to do to manage her rather than understand her. And one day I saw her in a museum with her friend talking very eloquently about an area that she was very expert in. And that was where I went, I've got this wrong and I need to learn more. I went then to Stirling University, which introduced the first MSc in dementia to the world, and I was pleased and privileged to be able to study on that. And that really led me on a journey to study Hammond Care, where I actually started to realize just some of what the model Hammond Care was doing well over 25 years ago. That was actually changing the way we think about the way we care for people with dementia. I think some of the biggest changes have been in the voice of people with dementia. When I was studying, one of the formative books was Hearing the Voice of People with Dementia by Malcolm Goldsmith. And it was really one of the seminal books on, let's see what people with dementia are saying, not only verbally, but non-verbally, which nowadays seems like a very basic thing to do, but at the time it was cutting edge to change the way we think and talk about the voice of people with dementia. And today that's radically changed, as people with dementia are more and more front and center, setting the agenda about how they want to be seen. And that's a big shift. Online media has shifted things significantly, sometimes not always for the better, but in most occasions it's really challenged us, because people are able to get their own voices out there more. Carers, people with dementia themselves, sometimes very confrontingly. I've been following on TikTok, for example, how people tell their stories, and it's very hard sometimes to see just how difficult things get when people's dementia has progressed. But equally, we're hearing lots of voices of people with dementia telling us about what they want, how they're living their lives, how they're engaged in their community. So there's a big shift in that sense. It's less rare nowadays to see things being done to people with dementia rather than with and involving people with dementia. So online has given voices and people a time. I think that's the other thing that's important about social media, is people can take the time to get their message shaped rather than be pressed to have a sound bite about what their needs are. And I think equally, carers are getting their voices recognized, telling their stories. That's very strong on TikTok as well. In season one, we were very much around a mic having a discussion on a set topic. This season's very different, because with the support of Ailsa Wood getting out there to talk to people on the ground, we're actually bringing voices into the studio in new ways, because we're visiting people in their own homes. We're talking to doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals in their settings, hearing what they've got to say. So it's allowing us to bring a much more rounded picture. A very confronting one when you hear from some of the students, for example, on their perceptions of dementia. It isn't always nice to hear some of those myths that are out there, but it also challenges us to think about, well, what can we do about that? So I think it's a very different season, and I'm very excited to see what people make of it. Now, the new season of the Dementia Podcast starts on the 20th of October with our first episode, and then you'll hear from us weekly with the new episodes. That's really exciting, and you'll just go to dementiapodcast.com or all of those podcast platforms that you might use yourself. It's really exciting because in this season, rather than have a studio set up where we're having conversations around a mic, we're actually getting out there, talking to people on the ground with them, hearing in their world what's happening for them. And that's going to be really exciting. We'll also have, through Ilsa, a different perspective perspective on dementia because I obviously bring my knowledge over the last 20 or so years, but she's asking questions sometimes that haven't been asked. So it's going to be really interesting to see how together we bring these stories together. And I'm really looking forward to your feedback on what is helpful, what is challenging, what's changing from what you're hearing, and what we should be doing in season 2.